You water your tomatoes in the evening, just as your grandmother did, soaking the entire plant down with the hose. That one caring habit is actually the fastest way to lose every plant in your row. Here is what almost nobody tells you. One of these 5 mistakes can take a healthy 6-foot tall tomato plant, a plant covered in green fruit, and turn it into a brown collapsed skeleton in under 2 weeks. It is driven by a water mold called Phycophthora infestans, the same organism that caused the Irish potato famine in the 1840s. The University of Florida confirms it can destroy a plant within days, and Iowa State University confirms it spreads on wet leaves and soil splash, which means it spreads on exactly the watering habit most people think is good for the plant. That is mistake number 3. And when we get to it, I am going to show you the 30-second change that stops it cold. So here's the deal. 5 mistakes. 5 things you must never do to a tomato plant in June, because June is the month that decides your entire summer. June is when the heat arrives, when the fruit is setting, when the diseases wake up, and when one wrong move stops being a small problem and starts being the end of the plant. By the end of this video, you are going to know exactly what those 5 mistakes are, exactly why each one wrecks the plant on a biological level, and exactly what to do instead, with the amounts, the timing, and the products named. Not vague advice, the actual fix. Before we start, do me one favor. Drop a comment and tell me what state you are watching from, and if you know your growing zone, put that too. I am asking because where you live changes everything here. A gardener in Zone 5 in Minnesota and a gardener in Zone 9 in Texas are fighting completely different battles in June, and I want to see who is out there. Throughout this video, I'm going to keep coming back to 2 American frameworks, the USDA hardiness zones and your regional climate, the South, the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic, New England, the Mountain States, the Pacific Northwest. So pay attention to yours. Inconsistent shallow watering and the rot it causes. You have seen it. The tomato looks perfect from the top, then you turn it over. In the bottom, the blossom end has gone dark, leathery, and sunken, like someone pressed a hot iron into it. That is blossom end rot. And here is the part that almost everyone gets wrong. It is not a disease, it is not a bug, and in most back gardens, it is not a soil that is short on calcium. The University of Illinois Extension classifies it as a physiological disorder, not a pathogen at all. The University of Maryland Extension ties it directly to inconsistent or shallow watering and drought stress. Here is the biology, because once you understand it, you will never make this mistake again. Calcium does not move around freely inside a tomato plant. It travels with water, pulled up through the roots and into the fruit as the plant drinks. When you water deeply on Monday, skip Tuesday and Wednesday, splash a little on Thursday, and soak it again on Saturday, the calcium delivery to the fruit keeps getting interrupted. The fruit is growing fastest right at the blossom end, the part farthest from the stem. So that is the part that starves first. The cells there collapse. The soil can be full of calcium, and it still happens because the problem was never the supply. It was the delivery truck. This is why dumping eggshells in the hole, or crushing up antacid tablets, or pouring calcium products into soil that already has plenty usually does nothing. You deserve to hear that plainly because a lot of videos will sell you the calcium fix. The real fix is water consistency, and here is exactly how to do it. Give your tomatoes 1 to 2 inches of water per week, delivered deeply in 1 or 2 long soakings, not a daily sprinkle. A daily splash only wets the top inch, so the roots stay shallow and the plant panics the moment the surface dries. Deep and infrequent does the opposite. It trains the roots to drive down where the soil stays moist, and a deep-rooted plant is a plant that can handle a hot week without missing a beat. Then lay down 2 to 3 inches of straw or shredded leaf mulch over the soil to hold that moisture steady between waterings. And before you water, push your finger 2 inches into the soil. If it is damp down there, wait. If it is dry, water deeply. That finger test is worth more than any moisture meter you can buy at Walmart. Your region changes the rhythm here, so pay attention to yours. If you garden in the sandy soils common across the South and parts of the coastal Mid-Atlantic, the water drains away fast, so you may need to water a little more often to keep that moisture steady. If you are on the heavy clay of much of the Midwest, the soil holds water longer, So you water less often and you let it soak in slow and deep. Either way, the goal is the same: steady moisture, never a drought followed by a flood. Do this and you get a bonus on top of stopping the rot. Consistent moisture also stops your tomatoes from cracking and splitting open, which is the other heartbreak of a summer garden. The fruit that ripens beautifully and then bursts overnight after one heavy watering, feeding your tomatoes too much nitrogen. This is the mistake that feels like love. You want big, strong, healthy plants, so you reach for the all-purpose plant food, the bright blue stuff, and you feed them rich nitrogen all season long. And the plant rewards you. It grows lush, dark green, and enormous, the envy of the neighborhood, and it gives you almost no tomatoes. The Old Farmer's Almanac has a phrase for this that gardeners have used for generations. The plant goes all to vine. Here is what is happening inside. Nitrogen is the leaf and stem nutrient. It tells the plant to grow green tissue, and when there is a lot of it, the plant pours every bit of energy into foliage, because that is what you keep telling it to do. But fruit does not run on nitrogen. Flowering and fruiting run heavily on phosphorus, the middle number on the bag, and on potassium, the last number, which the plant uses to size up and ripen the fruit. A plant flooded with nitrogen and short on the signal to reproduce will keep making leaves and keep postponing fruit. You have grown a beautiful house plant that happens to be a tomato. Oklahoma State University Extension recommends going the other direction. A low nitrogen, higher phosphorus blend. Something like a 10-20-10 worked in at planting time. That middle number, the 20, is the phosphorus that drives flowering. So here is your fix. Stop using the same high nitrogen all-purpose feed from spring through summer. Pick up a fertilizer formulated for tomatoes and vegetables, a 10-20-10 or a 5-10-10, the kind you can find at any Home Depot, Lowe's, or garden center, and side dress it lightly around the plant once fruit begins to set, keeping it a few inches off the stem so it does not burn. If you would rather feed the soil than the plant, work a few inches of finished compost into the bed before you ever transplant. Compost releases its nutrients slowly and steadily, so it feeds the plant without ever spiking the nitrogen the way a heavy synthetic dose does. There is a bonus reason to back off the nitrogen too. The North Carolina Cooperative Extension notes that an overdose of high nitrogen fertilizer can actually trigger flowers to drop right off the plant. So the very thing you thought was helping can cost you the harvest twice over. This is the one in the title. This is the one that kills plants, and it is the most natural, most well-intentioned thing a gardener does. You water your tomatoes from above, over the leaves, and you often do it in the evening after a long, hot day, because that feels like the kind thing to do. It is the single most dangerous habit in this entire video. Remember the claim from the start: the healthy 6-foot plant turned into a brown skeleton in under 2 weeks, the same water mold behind the Irish potato famine. Here is the plant, and here is exactly how the mistake does its damage. Tomatoes are vulnerable to a group of fungal and water mold diseases: early blight, septoria leaf spot, and the worst of them, late blight. The spores of these diseases live in the soil and on old plant debris. When you blast water down from above, or even when you water hard at the base and the soil splashes up, you fling those spores onto the lowest leaves. Iowa State University states this directly. The spores are spread to new leaves by splashing rain or overhead watering. Once a spore lands on a leaf, it needs one thing to germinate and break in: moisture, a leaf that stays wet. And what does evening watering do better than anything else? It leaves the foliage soaking wet all through the night, hours and hours of darkness and damp, which is the exact greenhouse those spores are waiting for. Early blight and septoria will work their way up the plant, browning and dropping the leaves from the bottom. That alone can defoliate a plant and ruin your season. But late blight is the killer. It is not a true fungus. It is a water mold, the Phytophthora infestans. And it does not politely start at the bottom. It hits anywhere, it races, and the University of Florida warns it can destroy a plant within days. A plant heavy with green fruit can go to brown collapse in under 2 weeks. That is the plant killer in the title. And the cruel part is that you invited it in with a watering can. So here is the fix, and it is the 30-second change I promised. Stop watering from overhead completely. Water at the base of the plant, at the soil, never on the leaves. Switch to a soaker hose or a simple drip line, the kind you can buy for $15 or $20 at any hardware shop, laid right on the soil under the plant. Cornell University recommends drip over overhead watering for exactly this reason and says if you must water by hand, do it when the leaves have time to dry. So water in the morning, not the evening, so the sun dries off any splash within the hour instead of leaving it wet overnight. Then do three more things. Lay down that 2 to 3 inches of mulch we already talked about, because it is also a physical barrier that stops soil from splashing spores up onto the leaves. Strip off the lowest leaves on the plant, everything within 6 to 8 inches of the ground, since those are the ones the soil infects first. And every time you cut, wipe your secateurs with rubbing alcohol, the 70% isopropyl from the pharmacy, between every single plant, so you are not carrying disease from a sick plant to a healthy one on your own blades. Base watering in the morning has a bonus too. Far less of your water evaporates, so you actually use less and the plant gets more. One more thing on this one, because mistake 3 rewards the gardener who catches it early. Walk your plants every couple of days and look at the lower leaves. Early blight shows up as dark brown spots with little concentric rings inside them, like a tiny bullseye, starting low and climbing. Septoria looks like scattered small spots with pale gray centers and dark edges. Late blight is different and more frightening, irregular water-soaked patches that can appear anywhere on the plant, often with a pale halo and a whitish fuzz on the underside of the leaf on a damp morning. If you see the bullseye or the gray spots, pull those leaves off right away, bag them, and put them in the bin. Never the compost pile, because the compost just saves the disease for next year. If you ever suspect late blight, act that day, because with that one, you are racing the clock. Have you ever lost a whole tomato plant, watched it go brown and collapse, and never really known why? Tell me in the comments what happened and what you think it was. I read these, and half the time the story in the comments is late blight, and the person never knew it had a name. Leaving the plant completely alone and never pruning it. There is a comfortable myth in gardening that the kindest thing you can do is let a plant grow however it wants. With indeterminate tomatoes, the tall, vining kind that keep growing all season, that hands-off approach quietly works against you. Here is why. Tomatoes constantly send out suckers, the new shoots that pop up in the V where a branch meets the main stem. Left alone, every sucker becomes a full branch, and the plant turns into a dense, tangled thicket. Air cannot move through it. After rain or dew, the inside of that thicket stays humid for hours, and humidity trapped against the leaves is the open door for every disease we just talked about in mistake 3. Pinching those suckers does two things at once. It opens the plant up so air flows through and the leaves dry fast, and it redirects the plant's energy out of growing endless foliage and into the fruit it already has. Michigan State University Extension reports that removing suckers leads to bigger fruit, earlier ripening, and fewer disease problems. And the University of California Master Gardener program confirms the same benefit for indeterminate varieties. The technique is simple, and you can do it tonight. When a sucker is small, 1 to 2 inches long, just pinch it off with your fingers in the V between the stem and the branch. Stay on top of it once a week, and it takes 5 minutes. Wipe your fingers or your snips with alcohol between plants. Now, here is the move for when you have let it go too long, because life happens and most of us miss a week or 3. If a sucker has already grown into a thick shoot with several leaves, do not rip the whole thing off, because tearing out that much growth at once shocks the plant and suddenly exposes fruit that was shaded. Use what growers call Missouri pruning instead. Take your clean snips and clip just the growing tip off the oversized sucker, leaving the bottom 2 sets of leaves in place. That stops the sucker from getting any bigger and stealing energy, while keeping those leaves on the plant to shade the fruit and keep feeding it. It is the gentle way to take back control of a jungle without traumatizing the plant in the heat of June. Now, here is one honest note, because you deserve accurate information and not just confident advice. Pruning is not universal, and doing it wrong causes its own damage. First, this is for indeterminate tomatoes, the tall climbing kind. If you are growing a determinate variety, the bushy compact kind bred to set one concentrated crop, do not heavily prune it because you will cut into the very growth that carries your harvest. Check your plant tag or your seed packet if you're not sure what you have. Second, and this matters most in the South and the mountain states where the sun is brutal, do not over prune. If you strip too many leaves, you expose the fruit to direct sun and it gets sun scalded, which is a sunburn on the tomato, pale leathery patches that rot. The University of Georgia, Extension and Iowa State both warn about this. The leaves are the umbrella, prune for airflow, but leave enough canopy to shade the fruit. Balance, not a buzz cut. This is the one most videos never mention, and it is the one that fools even experienced gardeners. You did everything right. You watered consistently, you backed off the nitrogen, you watered at the base, you pruned for airflow, and in late June, your plant is lush, green, gorgeous, and it has stopped setting fruit entirely. The flowers turn yellow, dry up, and fall off without ever becoming a tomato. So you panic. You assume you are doing something wrong, and you start feeding more and watering more, which makes it worse. Here is the truth. The problem is not you. The problem is the heat, and it has a name: blossom drop. Here is the mechanism, and it is purely physical. A tomato flower has to pollinate itself, and the pollen only stays viable inside a temperature window. Once your days climb past roughly 85 degrees and your nights stay up above 72 degrees, the pollen becomes non-viable. It goes tacky and dead, and the flower cannot set fruit no matter how healthy the plant is. So, it aborts the flower and drops it. The Alabama Cooperative Extension System, through its vegetable specialist, J.M. Kemble, pins the threshold at day temperatures above 85 and night temperatures above 72. And Oklahoma State University Extension puts the daytime ceiling around 90,000. And the University of Illinois Extension confirms tomatoes drop blossoms when summer days run above 90 degrees. This is not a soil problem or a feeding problem. It is a thermostat problem, and feeding the plant more does absolutely nothing. So what do you actually do in June heat? 3 things. First, give the plant afternoon shade. Drape a 30 to 40% shade cloth over the plants during the hottest part of the day. Purdue University Extension and West Virginia University Extension both recommend shade cloth in the 30 to 50% range to cut heat stress and reduce blossom drop. And you can get it at Lowe's, Home Depot, or online for very little. You are not trying to block the sun, just take the edge off the worst of the afternoon. Hang it on the west and south facing side, the direction the brutal late-day sun comes from. Raise it up off the plant on stakes or hoops so air can still move underneath. You do not need to cover the plant all day, just shield it through the peak hours, then let the morning and evening sun reach it normally. Second, keep your watering rock steady because a heat-stressed plant that also dries out is a plant that gives up completely. Third, and this is the long game, plant the right varieties. There are heat-set tomatoes, varieties bred specifically to keep setting fruit in high heat, developed back in the 1990s for exactly the southern summers that were wiping out ordinary tomatoes. The Alabama Cooperative Extension System credits these heat-set varieties with fruiting even when conditions would make a standard variety quit. Look for them by name at Burpee or Park Seed when you plant next season, especially if you garden anywhere across the South or the lower mountain states where 90-degree afternoons are just June. The bonus here is real freedom. Once you know blossom drop is just temperature, you stop blaming yourself. You stop overfeeding a plant that does not need it, and you simply wait out the worst of the heat knowing the plant will set fruit again the moment the nights cool back down below 72 degrees. It is patience, not panic. Before we close this out, do one thing for me. Think of one person in your life, a neighbor, your brother, a friend at church, somebody whose tomatoes give up on them every single July and who has never understood why. Send them this video. Do not write a long message, just send them the link. It might be the thing that finally gives them a real harvest. So let me pull all five of these together because they are not really five random rules. They are three disciplines. And once you see them that way, June stops being scary. The first discipline is water. That is mistake one and mistake three working together. How much you water and how consistently, plus where and when you put that water. At the base in the morning, never on the leaves at night. Master your water and you have shut down rot and you have shut down the disease that kills. The second discipline is feeding, mistake two, which is really about restraint. The wisdom to stop feeding leaves and start feeding fruit by cutting the nitrogen. The third discipline is air and heat, mistakes four and five. Opening the canopy so the plant can breathe and dry, and shading it so the heat cannot shut down the harvest. Water, feeding, air, and heat. Get those three right in June, and the plant carries you all the way to a full August basket. Miss even one of them in June, and you spend July watching a problem you could have prevented in 30 seconds. That is why this month matters more than any other. June is the hinge the whole season swings on. And listen, if you are in your 50s, 60s, or beyond, this matters more than a hobby. You have grown through enough summers to know that a garden is not really about vegetables. It is about standing in your own back garden in the evening with something you grew and handing a warm, ripe tomato to a grandchild who will remember it for the rest of their life. You have earned that. You have earned a back garden that actually feeds your family in August, not a row of brown sticks dead by the 4th of July. These five mistakes are the difference between those two summers, and now you know every one of them. If these gardening secrets change the way you look at your tomato patch, please subscribe and like the video. We are digging deep into the methods that history tried to hide and that nature rewards. Plant your future with us. The next harvest of knowledge will be ready for you soon.